Well, I have the pleasure of introducing our first guest for the afternoon on this session, Growing. This is Joy Blundell. You'll get to know her more in a minute. But Joy is one of the core leaders of Alive Church and pastors the Lincoln North location of Alive Church. She's a coach and the founder and director of Acts Trust, and we are delighted to have her with us at Ekklesia 2025. So please give a warm round of applause to Joy Blundell.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. It's great to be here in this incredible building and in our capital city, very different to where I've come from, in the Lincolnshire rural towns and villages. The other day I was driving actually through Lincolnshire from my home in a small village to the church office in the city centre of Lincoln. And it's a journey I make all the time, one that I do multiple times a week. And just before I arrived on the street behind the church and parked up, I thought, how did I get here? Like, I'd completely zoned out and missed the kind of attention of the turns that I'd taken and the gears that I'd had to change and all the things as I'm just thinking about my day. I couldn't even remember the drive. And then I've got a more recent example of that, which I brought my husband with me today. We don't get to travel very often together because we've got kids. And as we were leaving the house, I said to him, do you know, I'm so much more relaxed when you come with me. Normally, if I'm going somewhere, I'm like, what have I got? Head, wallet, keys, phone, have I got everything? And just kind of the sense of being able to go a bit more on autopilot because Paul's with me and he can be the order behind my chaos and my whirlwind as I'm like getting out the door. And we had a really lovely lunch in a restaurant just across the street, and we arrived here with loads of time, felt really relaxed. What a gorgeous place, the sun's shining. And just at 1:55, I reached into my bag to get my notes for this talk, and I was like, oh no, where's my iPad? And did a quick, as Paul's chatting on the table, I was just doing a quick find my device on my phone. I was like, oh no, I've left it in the restaurant. So at 1:55, I was like running across Hammersmith trying to find my iPad to make sure that I've got something actually to talk to you about as I get up here. And realized that because I was a little bit comfortable and I got a wonderful companion with me, I was a little bit on autopilot and maybe walking around London with my eyes closed and leaving my devices all over the place. And sometimes I wonder if my actual leadership journey is a little bit like that. I wonder how many of us sometimes lead on autopilot, you know, doing our thing, week in, week out. Sunday comes round really quickly, doesn't it? We don't often have a chance to reflect on how are we leading, who are we becoming, and where are we going? Leadership is not autopilot. It requires awareness of our posture, our power, and our purpose. I love the name of this conference. What an invitation for us to step out of autopilot in the next 2 days and to become aware of our posture, the power that we've been given, and our purpose. Where are we leading towards? To lead with eyes wide open as we join the psalmist as he prays, search me, O God, and know my heart, so that we can grow and become more Christ-like in our leadership. The Message translation says this: God, investigate my life. Get all the facts firsthand. I'm an open book to you. Even from a distance, you know what I'm thinking. You know when I leave and when I get back. I'm never out of your sight. Neither is my iPad. You know everything I'm going to say before I start the first sentence. I look behind me and you're there, then up ahead and you're there too. Your reassuring presence coming and going. This is too much, too wonderful. I can't take it in. Search me and know me. That's our prayer for the next few days as we think about how are we living with eyes wide open. And how are we leading? God, would you help us to grow, to become more like you in our leadership? I don't know if you can feel it in your bones like I feel it, but we're living in a time of great change, particularly in the West. Sociologists say that we're in the middle of an era shift, bigger than the Industrial Revolution. Christian thinker Mark Sayers calls this the grey zone, the messy overlap between one era ending and another beginning. Everything feels a little bit wobbly. I don't know if you can feel it, if you hear it, the people that you're serving, the mums at the school gate reference it. Everything feels slightly anxious as the old ways of doing things are being dismantled, and there's this kind of widespread anxiety about who to trust and what to trust. And for leaders, I think this is a huge opportunity and a challenge. How we lead in this moment really matters. There's a direct link between the health of the people that we serve, the health of our places, our towns and our cities, and our own personal health. Our posture matters. Our leadership shapes environments and cultures. You can see an example of the greatest leader of all time, our Creator God, who created an environment of flourishing in Genesis chapter 1. A wide open garden that was raw and yet to be finished. And he placed humanity in the middle of it, ready for creativity and flourishing to burst forth. And then we see just 2 chapters later in Genesis 3, in the fall, leaders who had misguided ambition, unmet needs, created an environment of dysfunction, and then that theme goes on and on and on all the way through humanity until we are here today. Leaders shape culture, and unhealthy leaders create toxic environments. Healthy leaders, healthy, self-aware leaders create spaces where people thrive. And I know that as church leaders, that is the thing that we want to see. Our people thrive, our communities thrive, our towns and our cities come alive. But trust in leadership is at an all-time low. And breaks my heart, I'm sure it does yours, to see the many leaders that we've heard and seen in the headlines, too many of them Christians, fall. Too many abuses of power and misappropriated authority. This is a moment for us to take stock and reflect and say, where do we want to grow to? Who do we want to become? What's our posture? What's our power that we're using? What's the purpose of our leadership? It's a moment for the body of Christ to be strengthened and for us to lead or choose to lead in a way that brings flourishing. When I heard about the name of this conference, I remembered a book that I read years ago by Erwin McManus. It's called Wide Awake, and there's a quote in it that I love. I want to read it to you. He says, when we live wide awake, the world begins to reflect the kind of place in which God intended us to live. After all, he placed us in paradise and expected us to take care of his creation. So much for a good start. Now we need to step up and reclaim what was lost. Jesus came to bring out the best in us. When this happens, we should expect that everything else will change for the better. We need to live wide awake because there are diseases killing millions, and we need to find a cure. Famines leaving multitudes starving, and we need to provide food. Economies leaving families homeless, and we need to create opportunities for work and wealth. Genocide that must be stopped. Slavery that must be ended. Water wells that must be dug. Children who need to be loved. Relationships that need to be healed. Elderly who need to be cared for. Beauty that needs to be created. Futures that need to be saved. And dreams that we must not let die or go unfulfilled. There's a future that needs to be created, and it's waiting for you and me to wake up and get out of bed. The alarm has sounded. It's time to shake off our slumber. This is a moment in history for us to lead in a way that brings flourishing to our world with eyes wide open. And so I want to show you a framework that I use often in my coaching and also as we lead teams across our network and in our church, a framework that's really enabled and helped me to reflect on my leadership posture, the power that I stand in, the purpose that I am walking towards, the kind of leader that I want to become, and also to shine a spotlight on maybe some of the things that I'm doing that aren't the kind of leader that I want to come. It helps me partner with the Holy Spirit to search me and to know me, my inner thoughts and motivations. Helps me to understand the authority I lead with and also the purpose I carry. It's written by an author called Andy Crouch. He's one of my favorites. I really recommend him. And he talks about this in his book, Strong and Weak. If you've got a paper and pen, you might want to draw this because it just might help you to kind of map it out and see what it is or where you sit in this framework. So we've got two axes of leadership. You've got the vertical one, which is authority, and the horizontal one, which he calls vulnerability. And let me give you his definitions. Authority, it should come on the screen, is the capacity for meaningful action. So our ability to bring change to the world. And vulnerability is the exposure to meaningful risk. So the cost that we bear in our leadership or the risks that we take. And any 2x2 chart gives 4 quadrants, so I'm going to talk you through the quadrants. Let's start with the bottom left. Low authority and low vulnerability leads to withdrawal or hiding away. It's perhaps the one that we see so many people in this generation falling into. A kind of illusion of having power, but not really having it, just hiding away and being comfortable and disengaged. You might see gamers doing this. They think they're playing in Fortnite in an army, and they're going to kill loads of people, but they're not really. It's just an illusion, and it's just fake authority and fake vulnerability, or maybe scrolling on your phone, maybe pornography users. They think that they are full of authority and power, but it really is right at the bottom, and they're not taking any risks at all for any others' well-being. Low authority and low vulnerability leads to withdrawal, hiding. High authority plus low vulnerability leads to exploitation. So this is power, but without risk, leads to corruption. You can see so many examples in history of world leaders who've sat up there in that quadrant, and we've seen injustice and corruption come out of their leadership, where they have the power to do something, to bring change to the people that they're serving, but will sit in their own wealth and power. The next one, low authority and high vulnerability, leads to suffering. I don't know if you've ever been in this quadrant. This is where you're fully exposed to the risks of being a human. Someone with flesh and bones who, as a result of the fall, the sickness, death, poverty, many of the people that we pastor might be going through various things at the moment, which mean that they're in this quadrant. Some of the people that we serve through our food banks and through our debt centres and through projects like Safe Families for Children will find themselves in this quadrant where they can't do anything about it, seemingly, but they're full of vulnerability, suffering, exposed to risk, but unable to change things. And then the last one. High authority high vulnerability, so high capacity for meaningful action and high capacity for meaningful risk is flourishing. And this is the place that Jesus was in, I think, all the encounters that we see in all of the Gospels. Jesus, full of authority, fully God, but also fully man, able to take risks, willing to take risks so that other people can flourish. And this is the place that he calls us as his image bearers to move into, to recognize the authority that we've been given. All authority in heaven and on earth was given to us. So go and make disciples and to take risks for the life of the world that we serve, so that we can bring heaven to earth and we can step into the goodness and the transformation and the kingdom advancement that he calls us to step into. And I think you can look at any encounter in the gospel and see Jesus full of authority, but taking risks for the people that he has come to save. But I just want to take us through the one in John 4 with the Samaritan woman at the well. I always think that the Bible often describes women just as the woman, but she's known by scholars of Fontini. I like to give the women the names that we gives them a bit of an identity. So Jesus, he's at a well. He's on a journey, and he, like most Jews, would have gone around this territory called Samaria, which is unclean to the Jewish people. He just chooses to take a shortcut and he walks straight through. So he goes through Samaria. First of all, that would be a really powerful thing to do. He knew that walking through a territory wouldn't make him unclean, because a cleanliness, purity thing is to do with the heart for Jesus, not about the territory or the people that he walks with or walks through. And the Bible says that he sends his friends off to get some food, and he sits down. It's noon in the middle of the day, and he has a bit of a rest by a well. And so you think about it, it's really hot. It's the hottest part of the day. He's really thirsty. And he's approached by this lone woman who is a Samaritan, who would be seen as unclean and someone that he should definitely not be hanging around with. And she would also, if she was part of a, more above board group of people, she would have come with a group of women. But actually, a woman approaching a man in those contexts would either be kind of up to no good or desperate for something. Jesus would have been expected to walk away or back off, but he stood his ground, full of authority. Fully God, he knew who he was. But fully man, he was really thirsty, really vulnerable, quite weak actually. And he made himself vulnerable to Fontini by asking for some water. Please, can I have a drink? Can you give me some water? People who use those wells would have to bring their own jars or buckets to the well, and he didn't have one. He was empty-handed, and so he needed someone to help him. He asks for water, and then he tells her all sorts of things about her life that she couldn't imagine anyone in the world knowing. And then he empowers her to go and to tell others, to become powerful in sharing her story of her encounter with him, yet vulnerable by kind of risking some of that story with her friends at the same time. Jesus, full of authority and full of vulnerability, took a risk so that a whole community could find life, living water. And I think the invitation today is to become more like Jesus. As our growth with eyes wide open, that we would lead with authority and vulnerability towards the flourishing of the world, to see God's kingdom come and needs met and places transformed and people healed and made whole and salvation springing up. I love the passage in Philippians 2 which describes just this. Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing. By taking the very nature of a servant, he, being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself to the lowest place, the place of suffering. He became obedient to death, even death on a cross. And then it says, and God exalted him to the highest place. The place of flourishing, the place that one day every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Jesus went low so he could bring everyone high into that place of full authority and full vulnerability. And if we want to be agents of change in the world, if we want to be ambassadors for Christ, ministers of reconciliation, then we too need to think about where we sit in this quadrant. And we need to be willing to bear the burden of visible authority and hidden vulnerability. And I don't know about you guys as church leaders, but I think this is the kind of thing that we have to sit in every week. Visible authority. People think, oh, they're the leader, like, how fun, you get to go to a conference in London during the week. But they don't see the vulnerability or the cost of that leadership. And without learning to bear the hidden vulnerability, we never truly are able to serve the vulnerability of others. And that's the beauty of Jesus. He bore hidden vulnerability so that he could serve our vulnerability. True leadership isn't about power over, but power for people. So it's worth just taking a moment to linger on this visible authority and hidden vulnerability and just make a comment on the question of perception and reality in terms of which quad we appear in. See, I think we can give the perception that if we're up in the top left, but our reality might be that we're in the top right by bearing hidden vulnerability. And this is a position of Jesus more and more as his story progressed towards crucifixion. Many times Jesus avoids the question of his true identity. And although he's fully aware of the direction of travel for his life and death, he chooses to keep it to himself. And there are loads of moments in leadership where leaders keep the full story of their context of leadership, the full context of the decisions to ourselves so that we can protect the people that we're serving. And this feels often like the hidden cost, the unseen burdens that we've got to bear. Think of national leaders who know security threats that they can't disclose, and then they appear really strong, but they're carrying deep vulnerabilities. So leaders look like they're at this top left quad, but they're not. They're actually bearing the cost of hidden vulnerabilities. Jesus knew this tension. His authority was clear, but his suffering was often hidden. Just think about the transfiguration where Jesus is on this mountain with Moses and Elijah, the two incredible heroes of the faith, and some of Jesus' friends are looking and going, wow, he's one of the big time guys because he's with these other two. And look at the glory. Look at the glory that he's walking in. But the only conversation that happens around that moment is about his suffering and the pain that he is about to walk into as he heads towards death. And the powerful thing for me is I find myself in all of these places, probably like every day, in lots of different ways. But as people who lay our lives down for people and for Jesus, we ultimately need to choose the way of suffering, vulnerability, and authority because we've been called to walk in his likeness. And none of us can escape the ultimate death that we walk to, which is the ultimate act of vulnerability. And if we visit these two quadrants in the right time, in the right way, we fully bear the image of the one who leads us towards flourishing. The image of the most transformative human being the world has ever known. So I want to invite you to ask yourself, where are you on this quad? What does it feel like? Where do you often go? To be honest, I often find myself in the bottom one, safety and withdrawal, like scrolling on my phone. Especially in the early days of my leadership journey, I often felt like the only woman around the table. That felt really vulnerable. I remember when I first started preaching, I used to go and hide in the toilets after I'd done a talk because I just felt so vulnerable. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Sometimes we have to make unpopular leadership decisions, and that makes me want to just quit and hide. Don't know about you. I've only actually been in the bottom left, right quadrant a few times in my life. In my early 20s, my younger sister was diagnosed with cancer, and she died 3-4 months after the diagnosis. It was really shocking. I'd had a really sheltered childhood, had no idea about that kind of pain and what happens there, and it plunged me and my family into this powerlessness of, I don't know what's happening and how I'm going to manage this. Bereavement and death is the place that takes us to this vulnerability, high vulnerability and suffering. Maybe you're there now. It's really painful. Feels really powerless. But the truth that I learned is that we've been given everything that we need for a godly life, and God gives us all resources from heaven, even when we walk through suffering. He never leaves us. And he calls us to move up into that top right-hand quadrant for our own flourishing, but also for the flourishing of the world. And that moment shaped me in a way that I don't think anything else has shaped me, and shaped my vocation and calling to partner with God to bring flourishing to other people. I wonder what your experiences of being in that area, in that quadrant, have done as you've partnered with God. And there's probably other moments where I'm less aware of when I've been in the top one with exploitation, when I've actually got a voice, but I don't possibly realize it all because I feel too scared. I don't want to take a risk, and I just sit in my own sense of power and authority as a leader, and I don't speak up when I should do. I wonder if you've been there. But I just love the call of our wonderful Jesus, who calls us to stand in our identity as image bearers and co-heirs with him, to partner with him in his kingdom business, to bring heaven to earth and to see flourishing in all the different creative ways that he's called us to. So I'd love to invite you, just as we go into table conversations, to close your eyes. I'd love to ask you to consider the people that God has called you to serve. Who are they? What do they look like? Where might they be in this picture? And in order to see them grow and flourish, where do you need to grow and flourish? What does it mean for you to open your eyes to the place that you are, and with courage to say, I want to grow up and to the right, full of authority, to understand my authority, and full of vulnerability, full of risk and courage to make a change? Maybe you could open your eyes. I've got some questions on the screen. Do you know, the thing I think is the most important for growth are good questions and good friendships. And it's brilliant that we're around some tables with some old friends, maybe new friends, where we get to ask some good questions, but also build some friendships and relationships who can help us unpack some of this stuff. So here are the questions that I'd love to invite you. You don't have to talk about all of them. You could just pick one of them. But how does each quad feel to you? When have you been there? Where are you today? If you feel brave enough to answer that. What stops you being up and to the right and then staying there? What could you do to get there? What do you need to do? Does your leadership or your life enable people to get up and to the right? So what are you doing to get other people? Partnering with God to move other people up and to the right. And how can you lead in a way that does that? You see, Jesus risked everything so that we could flourish. My invitation to you today is, will you do the same? This is a moment for us to rise, not with grasped power, but with sacrificial love. Let's lead with our eyes wide open as we grow. So I'd love you to get into conversation around the tables, to ask those questions, maybe take a photo. You can take them back and talk to your teams about them. But let's see what God does as we answer good questions and build good friendships.